Alright, welcome back to this weird thing that I am doing. If you didn't see the last video, good, or maybe not good. Your brain may or may not need that enlightenment, that absolute fever dream of a video, and this is going to be all the same. Maybe I shouldn't have described it like that, or maybe I should have, because that's what this is. What I'm doing is going through every single Pokemon that exists, and after reading through their dex entries and just a bunch of information about every single one of them on Bulbapedia, I tried to come up with some really stupid, useless, yet really deep and thought out shower thought about every single one of them. And there was a few times when I came across something that I ended up realizing someone else already came up with, so I changed it so that this is all fresh information, hopefully. Unless someone else has thought of this stuff before, I don't know. Anyway, since this takes a while, I'm gonna try and get into it quickly, even though I already yapped a while. So, we left off still in the Kanto region, because that whole 30-minute video didn't get through this, with Staryu. Now, I know I just kind of buttered this up a bit, made it sound like this is going to be a lot, but Staryu, this is actually one of the more underwhelming ones, sorry. Anyway, Staryu, it evolves with a water stone, so you'd think that evolving through an elemental stone that's powered with water, it would make the Pokemon channel more water energy, but in reality when Staryu evolves, it's already a water type. It gains the Psychic type through a water stone, and it also ends up looking even less like a starfish and more like an alien, which you would not associate with water, as far as I know. As for Starmie, its shiny colors are more reminiscent of its type than its regular colors because its shiny colors are blue and magenta, which tie in pretty well with the water and psychic types. Mr. Mime. Its dex number is 122, and in Galar, which is Generation 8, it got a regional form, Mr. Rhyme. It evolves into Mr. Rhyme in Galar at level 42. If you subtract that from its dex number 122, you get 80. Dex number 80 happens to be Slowbro, and that might not sound like anything, but it actually is, because Slowbro happens to be another dual Psychic type Pokemon, just like Mr. Mime, that got a regional form in Generation 8, or Galar. Boom. Scyther. It has an EX card from a time when Scizor existed, and this is weird because usually they only give Ultra Rares to fully evolved Pokemon, but this is the same case as Onix from the last video, where the set in question is geared around Kanto, so even though both of them had evolutions at the time, they got Ultra Rares. Kanto, Gen 1er supremacy according to Game Freak. They just had to do that. Jinx. Its height in meters is 1.4, and its weight in kilograms is 40.6. These add into a solid number being 42. Dex number 42 is Golbat, whose dual types are each weak to one of Jinx's types, which is pretty interesting how that ends up, because Flying is weak to Ice, and Poison is weak to Psychic, which are Golbat's and Jinx's types. Electabuzz. The dex says it exerts more electricity than it eats. However, that implies that Electabuzzes are in a calorie deficit, which may also mean that Electabuzzes, whatever their names are, suffer from body dysmorphia, and hence they're on an electric food calorie deficit. I'm sorry for pronouncing its name wrong. I don't need it to be self-conscious about its name too. We want to treat the guy with respect now. Magmar. Its evolution item is called the Magmarizer, which has the name Magmar in it. However, Electabuzz's evolution item is the Electorizer. But since the Magmarizer has Magmar's name in it, you would think it would be the Magmarizer and the Electabuzzer, and not the Electorizer. Because honestly, the Electabuzzer, that kind of rolls off the tongue well, because, like, buzzer, I'm pretty sure that's a word, or at least, like, a slang word. It works. Anyway, Pinsir. Its Japanese name is Kailios, which is almost identical to the region Kalos, just with an extra I added in. And what's interesting about that is that Pinsir got a Mega Evolution in the Kalos region. Tauros. Its Japanese name is based on the Greek word for centaur, which is a half-horse, half-man. Even though in Greek mythology there happens to be a half-bull, half-man called the Minotaur. So I'm not sure why they named it after the centaur and not the Minotaur, since it is a bull and not a horse. Magikarp. In the drained Lake Valor in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, you can see Magikarps flopping around. However, in Legends Arceus, you can't catch Magikarps there, but you can catch Barboach. Gyarados. The dex says it is known to burn things to the ground, which is weird, considering it's a water type, so why can it burn things to the ground? Well, here's my theory. It can only learn fire-type moves by TM, and Pokemon can only learn TMs when a trainer teaches it to them, because they're like devices that contain the programming for the Pokemon to learn the attack. So this may mean that Gyarados are only aggressive from being angered by their trainers, and perhaps their trainers either abandon them or they run away from their trainers, and perhaps they got angered by being forced to learn certain attacks, like fire-type TMs, and they can then go on to use those to burn things down and get revenge, like the dex says. Lapras. The trading figure game, and yes, that is a thing, the figure for Lapras in that is very reminiscent of what later went on to be the figure for Primal Kyogre in a TCG figure collection box. They're both like breaching the water with their fins out. Ditto. Its transformations in Smash lack the Ditto face and don't copy the character color like they're supposed to, because when Ditto copies something, it mimics the colors and it has a weird Ditto face on it, but in Smash, it's just a weird pink blob in the shape of a character. Eevee. It can learn moves that have the types of all of its evolutions, except for Jolteon and Glaceon, which would be electric-type attacks and ice-type attacks. Vaporeon. It's the only one of the 3 original evolutions to not have a full art EX card in the Generations set, which is weird, because that set was based around Kanto, at least primarily. Jolteon. Its Japanese name is Thunders, which spells the first 8 letters of its evolution item, which is the Thunder Stone. Flareon. The inverse of its dex number being 136, that backwards is 631. Dex number 631 is Heatmor. Both of them are pure fire types with a 7-letter long name. Porygon. Its dex number is 137. The inverse of that is 731, which is Pikipek. Both of them are normal types with a 7-letter long name. Even more specifically, they start with P. Ammonite. Its original sprites, from way back in the day, had thin pupils like Amistar, even though its original artwork didn't. Amistar. If you remove all of the letters in its name that it shares with Ammonite, not Ammonite as in its pre-evolution, but Ammonite as in the fossil, like the literal thing it's based on, you are left with simply S and R. This works because SR is like senior, and Amistar is essentially the senior to Ammonite, since it's the evolution and the older one. Kabuto. It is one of 3 water types from Kanto called the Shellfish Pokemon, and every single one that is called the Shellfish Pokemon is not actually based on a shellfish. The weirdest being Blastoise, which is literally a turtle. Kabutops. It evolves from Kabuto at level 40, and its dex number is 141. If you move 40 dex numbers away in either direction from its dex number, you are led to a pure electric type final evolution, Electrode to the left and Ampharos to the right. Aerodactyl. The horns on its Mega's head sort of look like a Y. That is, if you only look at the top two in the beard. But if you look at them all together, not counting the beard, they resemble an X. And this is, of course, interesting because its Mega Evolution was introduced in X and Y. Not sure if that was intentional, I just noticed that, and that might be a stretch, but that's the point of this. Snorlax. Considering it takes inspiration from Kirby, which is apparently true, its Japanese name was named after Kirby as well. Its G-Max form, considering the whole Kirby thing, that might have been based on Wispy Woods, which, is from Kirby. And the shiny calls to mind Iggy Woods because the tree is red, and Iggy Woods is a version of Wispy Woods from Star Allies, which is just a autumn leaf version. Anyway, Articuno. Obviously, people have made the relation before that its Galarian form looks like Space Chuck from Angry Birds Space, but I'm going to expand on that Angry Birds relation, because its Kanto form can then be related to the Blues from the original Angry Birds. And it goes even deeper than that, because Articuno has a tail that has 3 segments, and also has 3 ice crystals on its head, and the Blues are known to come in sets of 3. Anyway, Zapdos. Of the 4 electric types whose names start with Z, because there are 4 electric types that start with Z for some reason, it is the only one whose name isn't followed by an E. Its name is followed by an A. Moltres. Its dex number is 146. That backwards is 641, which is Tornadus, another member of a flying-type legendary trio. Although I guess you could say that's not really a trio anymore because that ugly creature Enamorus exists for some reason. At least as of Legends Arceus. Dratini. One of the only not Dragon-type and not Normal-type moves in its Learn set by level up is Thunder Wave, which might have inspired its Electric-type Delta species card, especially since it can learn, or not learn, but literally use that attack in that card. Dragonair. Its Conquest sprite looks like a pretzel. Yup, I said it, someone had to say it. Dragonite. The deck says it can travel the globe in 16 hours. Earth is apparently 24,901 miles. So, this equates to it moving at 1,556 miles per hour. If I did my calculations right. I hate math, so that might be wrong. Anyway, Mewtwo. Even though its DNA is meant to be near identical to Mew, their shiny colors are quite different. Though Mewtwo being shiny doesn't really make sense, since as far as I know, there's only supposed to be one. Or I might be wrong. But if there's others, that would mean the shiny form was intentional. Or perhaps just a genetic mutation. Which, is that how regular shinies work? I don't even know. I'm even confusing myself now. That's how you know this is getting out of hand. Anyway, Mew itself. The Stadium Dex says it's from South America for some reason. I don't understand why that is a thing, but anyway. Game Freak could reflect on this by making a region based on South America and make Legends Mew out of that. That would be pretty cool, because Legends seems to be a new path they're taking now that they're doing ZA after Arceus. Now we finally get to move on to Johto, obviously starting with Chikorita. Now, like most starters, Chikorita is primarily male for the gender ratio. But what's weird about this specifically for Chikorita is 2 things they did with its name. First of all, it was named after chicory root, which is spelled Chicory. And in its Japanese name, they actually kept it as the Chico, which is also Spanish for boy, which would relate to it being primarily male. Of course, that has nothing to do with that, because obviously it's just the word chicory, which is a plant. But, just keep that in mind, Chico is in chicory. That means male, or boy. What's weird is the English name, they changed the C to a K, almost as if they were trying to imply, no, don't think of this as a male Pokemon. Think of it as a more feminine Pokemon, even though we're literally making it a primarily male Pokemon. And the other thing to add on to that is the end of its name, which is Ita, which is also a Spanish thing. It's a suffix for feminine. It's a feminine suffix. So they have both of these Spanish ties that make it seem like it's supposed to be more feminine, even though it's literally mostly male. Anyway, Bayleaf. It learns Psychic type, Poison type, Normal type, and Grass type moves. And its level up learns that, at least. And if you take the first letters of each of these, obviously Psychic and Poison are both P, so if you just omit the one P, you can spell out PNG. Here's a PNG of Bayleaf, I guess. Anyway, Meganium. The effect of its aroma is described by the Dex as literally the opposite of what Bayleaf's is, which is weird because they're part of the same family. Cyndaquil. Its original shiny had a purple fire motif, like Magcargo's modern one. Now, its shiny has regular fire, though Magcargo's used to be blue, which is kind of weird. Quilava. This might be one of my favorite ones yet. I'm surprised no one else has mentioned this on, Reddit before, at least what I could find. The inverse of Quilava's dex number is 651. Quilava's dex number is obviously 156. Number 651 in the dex is Quilladin. And this is, genuinely crazy because both of those are middle stage starter Pokemon whose names start with Quill. And they are the only two Pokemon whose names start with Quill in the entire dex. And you might be thinking of Quillfish, but that's not right because they use a W instead of a U. These both start with Quil, which is really weird how that works out. Anyway, Typhlosion. Its Hisuian form may or may not have been inspired by the fact that its shiny used to be purple, since it's a ghost type, and has purple fire in its Hisuian form, and also from the fact that it had a ghost type Delta species card back in the day. I'm gonna flip the page here, because as I mentioned in the last video, I have this all written down by hand in a journal, because, yeah, that's how unhinged this is. Totodile. It's probably the most similar Pokemon to the dex shape it has, and if you don't know, all the Pokemon are classified under different pre-constructed shapes in the Pokédex, and a lot of them look absolutely nothing like the shape that they're designated under. However, Totodile literally looks like it is the shape that it's represented by, so maybe they based it around that. Anyway, Croconaw. It is said to have 48 fangs, even though the most sprites ever show is 6. For Alligator, the vowel omitted from its name is the first letter of its Japanese name, which is O. Sentret. It evolves at level 15, and its number is 161. 15 away in either direction leads to a flying type, being Moltres and Togetic. Sentret itself honestly looks like it could be a flying type, which makes that even more interesting, just because it has the little wings, because I guess it's kind of like a flying squirrel. Furret. It's pretty similar to Linoon in a couple ways. They're both primarily tan. They're fully evolved regional mammals, at least in their regular forms. And even though they're primarily tan, they both have brown fur accents, and they also evolve from primarily brown pre-evolutions. And they're both pure normal type, and they were just released one generation apart from each other. And they're both the regional mammals of their regions. I think I already said that, but anyway, Hoot Hoot. So in the Super Contests, I think that's in Black and White 2 or something, there are 3 Hoot Hoots that appear. One of them is named Strix, but we're not talking about that guy. We're talking about the other two, because both of their names, in some capacity, contain the word, or at least the letters for the word, hoot. And if you combine those, you obviously get Hoot Hoot. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I'm not going to say that every time, because I could pretty much say that about every single thing here. Noctowl. It wears a golden hat in its New Year's outfit. I think from Pokemon Go, that would make sense. Gold is one of its debut games, obviously, and also, that's the color of its shiny. Ladybug. It is part flying type, and I realize this one doesn't actually make any sense. Now that I look back at it, I don't know what I was cooking here. I said, it's part flying type, but Illumise and Volbeat aren't, even though they're all based on ladybugs. But, no. I literally just had to pause and re-record this because Illumise and Volbeat are fireflies, so I don't know what I was saying there. But still, Illumise and Volbeat should still be flying types, since they are still pretty similar to Ladybug anyway. Anyway, Lady In. The only difference between its English and Japanese name is the L becoming an R. This brings to mind the L and R buttons on most Nintendo consoles and controllers. Spinnerack. Its original sprite looks like its modern shiny, while its original shiny has never been seen since Gen 2, which is weird how they would switch it up like that. Ariados. For some reason, it only learns Poison Fang in a single TCG card and doesn't learn it in the actual games. Even though it's literally a spider and should be able to have it in game because that's kind of what spiders do. They have poisonous fangs. Crobat. It's a friendship evolution despite looking even angrier than its pre-evolutions. It does have that smiley face looking character in its Japanese name though. Not that that means anything, and I don't know how to read Japanese or whatever that's called. But look, it looks like a smiley face. So that's definitely why it's a friendship evolution. Chinchou. The deck says it shoots positive and negative charges from each of its antennae, which would imply that each of its antennae has a different charge, which would then mean they would be attracted to each other and be stuck to each other, which is never seen in sprites or any artwork. Lantern. The deck says its light can penetrate 3 miles underwater, which seems absurd because apparently the sun's light only goes about 1,000 meters. Pichu. When its ears are pushed down in certain Go costumes, they sort of make it resemble Helioptile. Cleffa. Its dex number is 173, the inverse of that is 371, which is Bagon. Both are base stages of a 3-stage line, while Cleffa's line is super effective to Bagon's line. Igglybuff. Its original shiny has green eyes, like the rest of its shiny eyes line, the rest of its shiny line's eyes do. But what's weird is that modern Igglybuff shinies still have red eyes. So I'm not sure why they do that with a lot of shinies, honestly. They just intentionally make it worse as time goes on. Togepi. The end of its Japanese name is Cleffa's entire Japanese name. Togetic. The difference between its gold and silver sprite and its crystal sprite is similar to its modern and regular shiny sprite. Natu. The only difference between its name and Xatu is the first letter, and if you take those letters, you get NX, which if you don't know was the code name they used for the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo NX. As for Xatu, the only front sprites that actually show the fact that it has 2 feathers on its head and not 1 are the original ones, because honestly I didn't even realize that. Mareep. The only members of its line whose shiny has pink wool and not pink skin is Mareep itself, because the others just have pink skin in their shinies, while Mareep has pink wool. Flaffy. It has a letter appearing 3 times in its English name and 3 times in its Japanese name. In Japanese it has 3 O's, in English it has 3 F's. Ampharos. Its Japanese name includes Ryu, predating its megaform that added the dragon type. And if you don't know, Ryu means dragon. That I'd like to believe was intentional. Bellossom. Its Gen 2 shiny clearly tried to fit Vileplume's regular colors, but then they changed it for literally no reason, because they like to do that. Meryl. Its dex number is 183. It evolves at level 18 into the 3rd member of its evolution line. 1, 8, and 3. That makes its dex number 183. Azumarill. Its name adds Azure prefix to Meryl's name, even though Meryl was already Azure, which is blue. In fact, its entire line is blue. Sudowoodo. The dex talks a lot about how much it hates water, and Diamond even says it is very weak to water, though it is only 2 times weak to water, and not 4 times weak to water like the dex is kind of hyping it up to be. Politoed. It can't learn Sing, even though dex entries mention it singing, and all of its mystery dungeon quotes are about singing for some reason, like that's the dude's whole personality apparently. Hoppip. Its 2D animated sprites show it flapping its leaf wings, whatever you call those little propeller thing, while newer renders show them simply spinning, like a literal helicopter blade. Alright, this one I had to take a few takes for, because I had no idea what I was trying to say when I wrote this down, but I finally pieced it together. What I was getting at is that Skiploom, every member of its evolution line, they have a P in their name. In addition to that, they all have 2 unique vowels. And what I meant by that is that Jumpluff has a U and a U, or at most 2 unique vowels is what I should say, because Jumpluff has a U and a U, Hoppip has an O and an I, and Skiploom has I's and O's, so no more than 2 different vowels in all their names. However, Skiploom is the only one of 3 total vowels because it actually has an I, O, and another O. Anyway, Jumpluff. It shares no letters with its Japanese names, but they both have 2 instances of double letters each. Apom. Its animated crystal sprite seems to have retractable teeth, like Donkey Kong does for some reason. Sunkern. In the Neo Destiny card set, its art shows 1 in the foreground with 4 more in the background. The same exact motif goes for its Paldea Dex image, which is weird. Sunflora. Its crystal animated sprite seems to blink, implying its eyes are already open despite looking shut. Yanma. There are 3 shinies in Supreme Victors. It is the only non-water type and only one capable of evolving out of the 3. Wooper. Its silver dex entry mentions the ground and poison, the type of its Paldea form that came out many years later. Quagsire. Its animated Diamond and Pearl sprite is similar to Very Naughty's jump animation from Donkey Kong Country. Espeon. None of the Pokemon known as the Sun Pokemon share a type with Espeon. The other ones are Sunflora and Volcarona. Espeon does share the psychic type with Solgaleo, though, and you might be thinking, well, that is the Sun Pokemon too, isn't it? No, because for some reason they spelled that differently. They spelled that with an N-E at the end. So it kind of shares a type with another Sun Pokemon, just a different spelling of it. Umbreon. It is a feline Pokemon based on the moon. Its number is 197. The inverse of its dex number is 791, which is also Solgaleo, like I mentioned for Espeon. And Solgaleo is a feline based on the sun. So you've got a feline based on the moon and a feline based on the sun. Yeah, you could argue Umbreon is a dog, but every evolution is pretty much a dog and a cat at the same time. Murkrow. The female has a smaller hat, even though it's supposed to be like a witch's hat, and usually when you think of witches, you think of them being female. So you would think the female one would have the bigger witch hat. Slowking. It is a cross-gen evolution placed between Murkrow and Misdreavus, which is interesting because those 2 Pokemon later got cross-gen evolutions and became counterparts to one another. So Slowking was sort of the harbinger, or the foreshadowing of that, being a cross-gen Evo himself. Misdreavus. It, along with number 100 and number 300 in the dex, are all base stages of a 2-member line. And I'm pointing that out because Misdreavus is number 200, so it sits snugly between the other 2. Unknown. This might be the most obscure one I'm gonna say yet, but if you're a 2000s kids, you might remember Squishlanders. And one of those little things, they were kind of like Squinkies. They were little quarter machine squishy animal figures. One of them was an orca whale, and I used to think this from all the way back in the day when I actually got mine of it from a quarter machine one time. I looked at the bottom of the orca whale and I thought, hey, that kind of looks like Unknown from Pokemon. Yes, that is the shower thought here. Wobbuffet. Psychic type instead of fighting type, despite the fact that it's based on a punching bag. Girafarig. The beta design fits the palindrome name better, since its 2 halves are actually the same mirrored shape, and its name is the 2 halves mirrored from one another. Girafarig. Pineco. Its Heart Gold Soul Silver sprite mimics its Emerald sprite. Its Black and White sprite mimics its Diamond and Pearl sprite, at least for their animations. Fortress. It seems to also resemble coral, which would imply rock or water type as a secondary typing. All three of its Heart Gold Soul Silver era cards have it in or near water, which really make it seem like it would be a water type and not a steel type. Anyway, Dunsparce. Only its Pokemon Crystal Sprite shows the tail actually spinning like a drill, which is weird, because it doesn't even seem like it would be able to do that. You'd think its whole body would just spin to make its tail spin. Anyway, Gligar. Its color is very inconsistent. It was pink in Generation 2, and then from Heart Gold Soul Silver onwards. However, in Gen 3 and Diamond and Pearl, it was light purple, but then in Platinum, it was dark purple. And a variety like this is also seen in the TCG, where its colors are just all over the place. Steelix. Its figure from the Groundbreakers TFG set is literally it breaking the ground. Like Groundbreakers. Snubble. Its category, the fairy Pokemon, obviously precedes the fairy type. Also, its Japanese name, which is literally just Bulu, is part of Tapu Bulu's name, and Tapu Bulu is a fairy type that was introduced many years later. Gramble. Its color is listed as purple in the dex, even though most of its sprite, including current ones, are pink. However, some older ones are purple, so that might be the reason why. Anyway, that's probably all for now. This is just about 30 minutes again, like the last one. That's probably going to be how long all of these are. Still got a lot more to get through for Johto, but we're going to keep moving through this. I was happy to see that the last video got a few K views, so that was good to see. I had a feeling this series would be pretty interesting. Then again, I'm just getting into it, so we'll see what happens with the rest of it. For now, if you like this, consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, and thanks for watching.